So God has given us as one of the commandments to honor father and mother. But when we've grown up in a family where our parents or one of our parents abused alcohol, it can be hard to live that out, right? To honor father and mother. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Lauren, of having worked with people who grew up in an alcoholic family system.
How to honor the fifth commandment and still establish boundaries. Like, what does that look like for us on a spiritual level?
Yeah.
As well as an emotional level, because there's bound to be emotional backlash coming from a dysfunctional family system, and there's also bound to be like what we call like unnecessary guilt and shame around setting boundaries.
Yeah, right.
You've basically been trained to basically self-censor your own boundaries. Like you'll sort of stop yourself from setting boundaries because you know that in the past setting them meant abandonment, etc. So,
and how do you set boundaries while still being respectful and honoring father and mother? Right. I think that can be a really tricky balance.
Right. So maybe we start with like how to define them. I have kind of a nice definition for them.
Love it.
I say that boundaries are the limits that we set in order to protect the sanctity of relationship.
The sanctity of relationship. I like that.
I think a lot of people have been sort of falsely led to believe that boundaries are a like manipulation tool or tactic that people will use, or they're like a big old brick wall that people set. So oftentimes people who have like severe mental illness, sometimes I'm thinking of like personality disorders. Sometimes they think of boundaries as like, so I just cut everybody out of my life.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a boundary. That's pathology.
Yes.
Essentially, when I say they're the limits that we set to protect the sanctity of relationship, what I mean is people represent certain amounts of safety to us. So safety depends on somebody's ability to acknowledge us, accept us for who we are without judgment, really just like receive our essence without, like if you feel safe, when you feel safe with somebody, there's this sentiment of like, I can be who I am. Yeah. And there's not going to be preconceived judgments and this sort of thing. And those are some of the pillars of what it means to be in a close relationship with a person. And if someone can give you a vast amount of this, you might consider the relationship pretty safe. If someone doesn't have the capacity to be non-judgmental, if someone doesn't have the capacity to accept you the way that you are, see you the way that you are, they are bringing into the relationship all of their own wounds from the past, triggers from what their mom did to them. And, well, if you wouldn't have said that, that reminded me of when your mom used to act this way with me, and you're just like your mother, like that sort of thing. They're bringing in other wounds, other relationships, other betrayals, and they don't have the capacity to see you. When you hear language like that, black and white thinking, those kinds of things, those are signals like this is not a safe person emotionally, because they don't have a receptivity to who you truly, like the essence of who you are. Does that mean that we throw them, just like out with the bathwater? Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Hopefully not. I mean, hopefully that's why setting healthy boundaries can help us not having to completely throw them out, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And so when I say protecting the sanctity of relationship, the question depends largely on how capable this person is of honoring boundaries that you need, limits that you need to be in place in order to not become resentful, angry, embittered, just basically what I call acting out of your character.
I like how you use the word capable, Lauren, because it takes the judgment out, right? I mean, some people are clearly maybe not willing to respect your boundaries, but some people out of their own trauma, just what you just mentioned, Lauren, are not capable, right? Yeah. Because you setting a boundary might make them feel really anxious, afraid, panicked, right? About being left alone, being abandoned. And so they're not, out of their trauma, out of their experiences, they're not capable of respecting your boundaries, which then we could say, I can, that then I don't have to judge you for that, right? Because you're not willing, you're actually just not capable. Yeah. That doesn't mean that we then should allow that you to, run over me. I should still set those boundaries. But I think that's an important distinction, that when people fail to respect your boundaries, it's not always because they're not willing. It's sometimes because they're just not capable.
Yes, absolutely. And I think too, like oftentimes, so I like to assume the best about anybody that I'm.
Yeah, right.
If you come into my office and you're talking about your family, I'm never going to say like, oh, they didn't, they intentionally with ill will made this kind of decision.
Right.
I think it's just healthiest for everyone in the room just to assume like, maybe this is a limitation that they have.
Yeah. Right.
I can't really be the judge of that. I'm
Right.
not in charge of judging people's hearts and souls. So
Right.
I don't waste my time on that.
Right.
But
Yeah.
what I do know is that this person seems to be, for whatever reason, whether their own choice or otherwise, incapable of
Yeah.
of exhibiting a certain behavior that I would need in order to be in close relationship with them. So that's when we decide how close or far we can be to someone based on their level of safety that they represent.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful about this is that it's flexible. So if they grow and heal, you can take limits down, and they can be allowed to come closer.
Yeah.
But if they get worse, you also have the capacity to scale things back.
Yeah.
And so the beautiful thing about boundaries is that ultimately it's protecting the charity that you harbor for another person. So if a person is so dysfunctional and cruel that the most charitable thing you can do as a person, because you also have limitations, you're not perfect, you're not God, okay? If the most loving thing genuinely that you can do for someone is to separate completely, then do so.
Yeah.
Sometimes that is for a time, sometimes it's for a whole lifetime for some people.
Yeah.
But either way, the goal of a boundary is to put a fence around what you consider to be necessary in order to love another person.
Yeah.
So that might mean and I hope it does mean, no one should be name calling you.
Yeah.
No one should be consistently belittling you or constantly hyper criticizing you. These are all things that it's okay to have a boundary here. And if someone's incapable of upholding it, you just acknowledge that, accept that. I'm not saying it's easy. And then you make amends. You don't to your own behavior. You don't expect someone to bend to your will. So that's the part that I want to get into about boundaries are not ways to manipulate people.
Right.
Which perhaps if you come from an alcoholic family system, most likely if you come from an alcoholic family system, you've seen behaviors that are meant to control.
Right. Which is why boundaries are threatening.
Yes. Yes.
And hard to set if that was your experience with boundaries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the thing is, boundaries are distinctly different than manipulation and control because they put all the cards on the table and you say, this is exactly where I stand. And if you violate this contract that I'm proposing, I'm not going to retaliate. I'm not going to necessarily you don't have to listen. You don't have to do as I say. But it just gives me the information that I need to know to move out of the way.
Setting a boundary also doesn't say that I get to control what you do next. Right. I set a boundary and I'm not in control whether or not you're going to respect it. But if you don't respect it, I will, there will be a consequence.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is that people assume that if someone reacts poorly, which you've been primed, if you grew up in an alcoholic family system, you were primed to walk on eggshells in order to prevent emotional backlash.
Right.
Makes sense.
Which something you said just earlier, you were saying how, with boundaries, as the person heals, and I'm assuming you meant the alcoholic parent, as they heal, you can kind of be more flexible. You can kind of draw closer. And kind of adjust like that. But when you're a child living with alcoholic parents, you most likely do not have that ability, that insight to actually, first of all, draw boundaries and to be flexible with that. And that's why it's so wounding, because you're just so vulnerable to that.
Yeah. Well, children can't have boundaries, literally. It's
Yeah.
impossible. In a healthy family system, you can, but in an alcoholic family system, there's no room for you to have a boundary.
But the positive thing is, if you're an adult now, you can start setting these healthy boundaries and to allow those relationships to heal and to actually kind of what you were saying, Lauren, if you have healthy boundaries with somebody who uses substances or who has hurt you, setting boundaries is the only way you're going to be able to have any kind of relationship with them. Yeah. Because the only other option other than setting boundaries is to completely cut them out. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And the interesting thing is that oftentimes when people begin to set them, they're like, wow, this sucks. It feels almost like it's like their worst fear confirmed, right? It's like, I began to set boundaries with family members, and now my greatest fear is confirmed that I'm actually not worth it because no one's showing up. No one is agreeing to these terms, or I feel like people are abandoning me, or people are angry with me, all these things. And so what I might suggest is starting small, really building your boundaries. If you have any healthy people in your life, building boundaries with people that you think you might be able to get a positive outcome. So if you have a really good friend that is agreeable like you maybe, or that you really trust, and you have some indication interiorly that like, I think they could be okay with like a small boundary that I set just to test, that would be more where I would start. Just to get yourself some momentum before you begin setting them with family. So that's kind of, just kind of a forewarning for people that like setting boundaries doesn't mean, it doesn't guarantee an outcome. And sometimes those outcomes can feel really overwhelming and distressing.
Well, Lauren, how would you say, what would that look like practically? Like if somebody grew up in an alcoholic family system, is now an adult, and they want to start setting those healthy boundaries, what would that look like very practically?
If you're an adult living at home with family members who are actively using drugs or alcohol, or addicted to porn, or doing any kinds of behaviors that you would associate with a dysfunctional family, to the best of your ability, if you can, to leave. I know that's not
to move out, you mean?
Yeah. To move out, so that essentially to establish financial independence, which, by the way, is one of the primary way in which people are often manipulated into staying in dysfunctional family systems, is through financial, basically helplessness.
Kind of like, you live here, therefore I get to manipulate you?
Well, also though, like oftentimes in dysfunctional family systems, there's a high performer who makes a lot of money, but in response to the money that they make or the power that they hold, everybody has to walk on eggshells for them. And so one of the, financial independence and physical separation, so having like physical boundaries from people, is a healthy way to then begin to go like, oh wait, this is my space. This is the place I can come to when the family is chaotic and it's too much for me, to have a literal separation between you and your family. So that would be, if you're living at home, if you're already separated from your family because you kind of knew when you were 18, like, I'm getting out of Dodge. Maybe you're somebody who came from an alcoholic family system that tends to be more successful, or like you are more motivated than the other members of your family. I would suggest setting boundaries in areas like, maybe you give financially and you enable.
The alcoholic parent.
Sure, or sibling, or
siblings,
whatever.
Okay, who are in the helplessness.
And you do so out of guilt.
Speaking of guilt, I think that would also be a really important boundary to set, is to be really mindful of, do I feel like if you are the one who's maybe more successful and has been motivated to be financially free, to be careful not to feel like you're now the savior of your siblings. Right? Yeah. To set that boundary and say, sure, I'm supportive, but I am not the one who's going to save them.
Which the hero archetype for sure left to come back. I mean, when you grow up in a dysfunctional family, those who survive and become somewhat functional they absolutely have survivor's remorse, and they feel like, oftentimes they'll feel like they left to be able to come back and bring something to save the sinking ship. And this is where emotional reasoning becomes like a really important thing to identify. It's a distortion, as you know, like it's one of the cognitive behavioral distortions. And when we're reasoning from how we feel, like it's like, oh, I feel guilty, therefore I must have done something wrong. Well, your family primed you to feel like you're the one who has to be responsible for everybody else because no one can take care of themselves. Here's the problem. And this is sort of the root, or like the crux of what makes boundaries essential. Enabling someone, so essentially confirming to them that you also believe that they're incapable of getting better, is cruel. Enabling another person and disallowing them the self-efficacy that's gotten you so far in life and helped you feel accomplished and proud of yourself. I mean, think back on the things. There's this beautiful poem at the beginning of the book called The Enabler, and I can't remember it word for word, but I do remember like the last thing, like little stanza is like, I will tie your shoes, drive you to work, lie to your boss, whatever, all in the end to deny you the pleasure of being able to say, I did it myself.
That's good. Yeah. And
that's the subtle cruelty. Yes. That's the subtle lie that's been slipped in under the radar that like no one else in your family or these certain people in your family are incapable of getting better. But the truth is, the reason they're incapable of getting better is because people are constantly saving them. And we see saving them from like financial issues, saving them from going to jail, saving them from the law, saving them from all of these things. And we're going to get into this in the next episode about like justice. But the point is that when you save them, you're saving them from a really important thing, which is a rock bottom. And I know everybody knows what that, that's a very common term that people use. And it's basically like hitting the floor and realizing like, I can't continue to live my life like this. And rock bottom, any alcoholic at any meeting will tell you, rock bottom is the best thing that can happen to someone who is living a life of sin. Living a life that's out of control and living a life in which they are not the primary agent. Hitting rock bottom is a miracle. It's a gift. I know I'm someone who hit an emotional rock bottom. Like it's the best thing that can happen to you. And so it's horrible. It's incredibly painful, but it's a severe mercy. And so when you constantly swoop in to save because you feel guilty, because you've been trained to feel guilty, what you're actually doing is preventing people that you love from having their own wake-up call, and they need that wake-up call. Yeah.
So what we're saying is we're giving you permission to stop saving the people in the alcoholic family system.
Right.
Even though you are capable of it, right? Don't feel guilty, but we're giving you permission to stop enabling. And we're not saying that in like a judgmental way. Like, no. It's coming from a good place. Like, you're a good person, but we're giving you permission to, put that to rest.
Yeah. And likely you will feel guilty.
Yeah.
Everything inside of your body will tell you, if you don't do this, mom and dad are going to rage. I'm going to be abandoned. Everyone will hate me. You will feel guilty. I can almost guarantee it.
But the good news is that feelings don't always point to the truth.
Exactly.
And thoughts also don't always point to the truth. Yeah. Right? So notice those thoughts, notice those feelings, acknowledge them, but you don't need to
cater to them.
Yes, that's right.
You're not a slave to your emotions.
Yes. And if you even want to take it a step further, this is something that we would do in therapy, right? Is to replace those negative thoughts.
Yeah, reframe. Do you have a helpful one?
I guess in short, I would tell someone to replace those negative thoughts with something like, I am not their savior.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to not act right now. And addressing that guilt piece and just really directly on the head of saying, I'm a good person. I am not selfish. I can't save other people.
Yeah.
Submit them, into the care of Christ. Pray for them.
The serenity prayers.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe also something like, just because I'm able doesn't mean I have the responsibility. Yeah. Like, I'm not responsible for my siblings. I'm not responsible for my parents.
Yeah.
In the sense of, fully responsible. But I mean, these are just ideas. I would encourage you, as you're noticing those negative thoughts and feelings, kind of feel out what would be the positive, kind of like the opposite of that. And it doesn't have to feel true. In fact, I guarantee you it will not feel true at first. Like, if you feel really guilty, like, I should be, driving that person to work or sending them money, and you don't do it, you're going to feel really guilty. And if you say to yourself, I'm a good person, this is not my job, this is not my responsibility, it's not going to feel true. But the more you do it, the thing of like not enabling, and you practice rehearsing that positive script, with time that's going to feel true. Just like all the negative script of I need to help, I need to enable, I'm a bad person, I'm selfish, that has started to feel true, not because it is true, but because you've told yourself often enough, and your brain has observed you acting on it often enough that it started to become your truth. And so once you start replacing that with time, you're going to update what feels true.
Very true. And your behaviors will also help facilitate that change.
That's why uncovering these things in therapy is so important, because once you gain that insight of right? Because you look at these underlying beliefs, we would call them, of like the enabling and the feeling guilty. You would look at that and say, is that true? Is it serving me? What is actually true? And then aligning your thoughts and your behaviors with the actual truth that you actually believe to be true, so that what feels true with time will align with what actually is true, what you actually believe to be true.
Yeah. With all of that being said, you know, the big question, the underlying question is like, how is any of this honoring to your father and your mother?
Like how we're setting healthy boundaries, honoring to father and mother.
Right. And so I want to tie in a few of the like little loopholes that I let hang. And one of them was like seeing boundaries as an act of charity. One of the things that I'll say to myself is like, boundaries are honoring to God, they're honoring to me, and they're honoring to other people. Mm-hmm. Listen, there's no act that you can do that's self-loving that's not also loving to other people and God. There's no act that you can do that's loving to God and not loving to yourself and other people. There's no act that you can do that's loving to another person that's not also loving to you and to God. Love is reciprocal. It's not about taking. So,
right.
If you're loving, genuinely loving, and I don't mean loving as in self-indulgence, I mean loving as in aligned with your conscience.
Yes. Yeah, it's a good distinction.
If you are loving yourself, you are also loving other people. Therefore, that's why Christ says, you know, what is the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second is like it, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. There is a community, there's a communion of love happening between your neighbor, God, and yourself.
Yeah.
And you cannot remove one single player from that trinity of love.
Yeah. So good.
And so the reality is that if you're engaging in acts that are forcing you, if you're engaging in dysfunction that creates in you a dynamic where you sort of impulsively will act out of your character. That's what I call it. Like, meaning you have a conscience, you have a set of moral guidelines that you like to live by. But when you engage with your mom or your dad or your brothers or your whatever, you're like escalated and angry and resentful, and all these things are coming up for you. What that signifies to me is that there's an overwhelm in the system. Things need to be processed. It's possible that you do get back to a place where you can regularly engage with these people. But the point is that boundaries need to be set until things are resolved, and then you can go back in and see from there, like calibrate from there, like how close or far away do I need to be from these people?
Yeah.
But you're essentially, like I said from the beginning, setting limits around what is good. The parts of your family that are intact, you want to preserve those.
Yeah.
Pushing yourself beyond your capacity and then breaking, becoming resentful.
Yes, right.
Being enmeshed. These are not honoring things. So in the Catechism, I'm going to read from here what the Catechism says about the duties of children. So it's talking about, as long as a child lives in the home, the children should obey the reasonable directions of their teachers and all to whom their parents have entrusted them, along with their parents. The reasonable directions. But if a child is convinced in conscience that it would be morally wrong to obey a particular order, he must not do so. As they grow up, children should continue to respect their parents. They should anticipate their wishes and willingly seek their advice and accept their just admonitions. Obedience towards parents ceases with the emancipation of the children. Not so with respect, which is always owed to them. This respect has its root in the fear of God, one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit. So fear of God is essentially fear of not like God himself. I mean, there's a kind of deference and like awe, but also really what it means is like fear of being separated from God. So fear of like eternal damnation, fear of sinning against God and offending him. And so we ought to be more afraid of fearing God than anyone on earth. It is not, enmeshment is not holiness. Resentment is not holiness.
Yeah.
Guilt, fear, all the things that living in a dysfunctional family breed are not holiness. If you're seeking holiness, it will lead you to things like peace, joy, love. You're not doing it wrong if you're growing up in a family where these things are just not fruits of the family, and you need to step away in order to garner those things for yourself. And then in time, you can slowly, with conscious thought and help and, you know, advisors, let little parts of the fruit that you've reaped fall on the home, fall in the home of your family. But there's nothing sinful about stepping away from dysfunction. That's not honoring your family to continue the dysfunction.
I've definitely made that experience with clients that I've worked with, is that, especially in like enmeshed family systems, when they actually start to set boundaries, like the adult children, they report back to me and they say, my relationship to my parents has improved. I feel more love for them. I can respect them because you're not constantly, like you were saying, triggered into resentment, into anger, into fight or flight, right? It's really hard to love and be respectful if you are in fight or flight. So put up those boundaries so that you can rest inside those boundaries, and then watch yourself naturally be able to have empathy for your parents, be able to respect them and honor them. And honoring them doesn't mean obeying. I love that you made the distinction, right? Because you can honor someone by at the same time saying, I don't agree with what you're saying. In the Acts of the Apostles, we read, we must obey God rather than men.
Yeah.
And St. Thomas More is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Because
king.
Yes, right.
Which, by the way, they believed in basically that the king had like divine right. So
yes. Yep.
He would have very carefully considered.
Yep. Yeah. So for anybody who hasn't heard the story of St. Thomas More, he disobeyed. He was employed by the king. Was it King George VIII? King Henry VIII. Yeah. King Henry VIII, and he directly disobeyed something that the king asked of him because it didn't align with his conscience, and he was killed for it. Yeah. But he really exemplified that it's more important to obey God than an authority figure. And so, respecting your parents is not the same as, sometimes you have to, like you were saying, Lauren, step away, say, I don't agree with what you're saying. I'm not going to do what you're asking me to do, but I will do it in an honoring way. I won't call you names. I won't put you down. One very practical thing that I found really helpful, if you're having a hard time, because I can see how it can be really hard to respect someone who's hurt you and respect someone who constantly makes bad decisions. Like, how do you respect that, right? How can you be honoring? Actually praying for that person, I have found to be an amazing way to change your perspective. It's really hard to be mad at someone that you're praying for, and it really gives you the eyes of God for that person. And God loves all people, and that it makes it easier for us to love them and respect them and have empathy for them.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that part of what gives someone the courage to be able to break free from the dysfunction of an alcoholic family system is reframing things like boundaries in a healthy way. And so one of the things that I might suggest is, I wish I brought it with me. I completely forgot it today, but it's a book called Boundaries. We'll put it somewhere. We'll put it there, maybe.
Probably here.
Ding. And it's called Boundaries by John Townsend and Henry Cloud.
So good.
It's actually, everything is framed from a Christian perspective. So they actually utilize Christian concepts to justify the use of boundaries. Mm-hmm. It's much needed, I think, in the Christian context, because charity gets conflated with basically being like a doormat. And they are just so not the same thing. All you have to do is read the Gospels to notice that Jesus Christ was anything but a doormat. Yeah. He called Herod a fox. He called the Pharisees like vipers and walking tombs and all this stuff. So basically, the point is that if you need a bit of like a frame of reference for these things, and it's obviously you need more support than just this podcast, my suggestion is that you utilize some resources that could be really helpful to you. So Boundaries would be a good one. A good therapist for yourself. Yes. A spiritual director that is schooled in dysfunction and how it can affect the spiritual life would be really helpful, potentially. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing that I would suggest, and I've made this suggestion before and I'll continue to make it, is adult children of alcoholics meetings where you really get to the nitty gritty of like how this dysfunction has infiltrated your life and how to be free from it.
Yeah. So and if you want to learn more about boundaries and why boundaries is not the same as charity, watch this video right here where we cover all of that in detail.
Thanks so much for meeting with me today.
Yeah, I loved our conversation. Thanks for sharing your insight. Yeah. And if you missed our other videos on this series, go check them out on our channel. And until next time, God bless and have a good week.
Please hit the like and subscribe and hit the bell for more notifications. Thanks.
Bye. Bye, guys.